Alright, so in the last lesson, we just basically went over what the different windows actually mean and what they do. And we basically got comfortable with Unity's UI. So these are all from the last lesson. I'm just gonna select them all. I'm gonna select this and hold on Shift and select them all. Click on Delete. Now I'm gonna save it. And now we have an empty scene with only our camera. Awesome. Now the camera also has the camera component, so we can change the background if we want. So this shows us our game view right here. This little icon or this little window shows us our game view. We have the culling mask, so if we actually don't want to show something in our camera, this actually cuts it out. And now we have it set to everything. We have the different projections. We can project it in perspective or orthographic. Currently, we're projecting the camera in orthographic because we are making a 2D game. And 2D cameras are orthographic. You can change the size of the camera, so for example 7 or 5. Currently it's not showing any differences, but if we had sprites, so if we want to change the size, 8, it changed the size. If we want to change it to 9, maybe, hey, 15, why not? And you can actually change the position of the camera too. Yeah, these are all the basic settings you're gonna be needing. You don't have to go in depth with the rest of the settings. So yeah, I'm gonna just delete them all again. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually add in a circle right here, and I am going to add in a square right here. So we just want to make a simple ground tile. We just want to make a simple platformer, for example. I want to change this square to something like green. We want to play a simple platformer. So if we click on play, we want this circle to go down and collide with the square. Now, as we can see, nothing is happening. Why is that? Well, because we don't have any components added to these different game objects. So we're basically just telling Unity to just draw a circle and draw a square with no extra details. So what we're gonna have to do is we're going to have to add gravity, and we're gonna have to add something that tells the Unity engine to perform collisions between two different game objects. So I'm just gonna show you what that actually means. So in this circle, we just want to add a rigid body. So it's basically that basically just means physics, add in physics. These are the different settings for the physics of the circle. So we have the mass, we have the linear and angular drag, we have the gravity scale for this object, and we have the collision detection. We have the constraints if we want to keep it on the rotation, on the Z rotation, and we have this square object. Now if we play again, as we can see, the player actually fell, but the player actually didn't collide. So why is that? We're actually missing one more component, which is the collider component. Now, if we just type in collider, we have tons of different colliders, one of them being the box collider 2D. So we're just going to use the 2D colliders, not going to use the 3D collider as much. So anything that has 2D after it, any collider that has 2D after it, we're going to be using that. If a collider does not have 2D after it, which means that that collider is actually a 3D collider, we're not going to use that. So for example, let's just make a circle collider, and let's add a box collider to this square right here, or to this box. So now when we collide, as we can see, it stopped. So it actually collided successfully. Now we also have different gravity scales. So I'm just going to create a scene right here. Maybe make this one a bit bigger, set the mass to 3. Let's see what happens. So we basically have different physics game objects operating in one scene, interacting with each other. And yeah, so that was actually a pretty cool physics simulation. I actually like physics-oriented games a lot, so that's where Unity is actually pretty cool. Its physics engine is actually pretty cool. It's pretty accurate too. So this square object actually fell down, so I want to add another square to it. I want to set this square as the parent of this wider square. So what'll happen, or sorry, this square actually doesn't move without this other small square's position. And I'm gonna set the gravity scale of this to be 10, so it doesn't move. I'm gonna set the gravity scale of this, or not the gravity scale, sorry, the mass of this to be 5, and the mass of this to be 10. I'm gonna delete all of these other squares. So basically a simple scale simulation. Awesome. As you can see, the scale actually fell down a bit, but the other circle with the mass of 10 actually was heavier, which is actually correct, and actually that's what we wanted to happen. And you actually have a lot of different components. So just going here, you have all of the different components. So you have the audio components, you have the effect components. So these are all specified in effects. You have the physics 2D. These are all physics 2D components. You have the spring joint and all the other. You have the circle collider 2D and all the other physics 2D colliders. But you can also actually create a new script. And when creating a new script and programming it, that's actually considered a component. So a component can be on and off. So you can actually disable this component, which renders the sprite. It's still there though, but the sprite isn't being rendered. The same thing with the box collider. You can actually disable it. So it's not the same as deleting it. When you delete it, it's gone, but you can enable and disable it whenever you want. You can actually enable and disable an entire game object too if you want. And yeah,